Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at the American College Center for Women for our webcast today, Leading with Empathy in Financial Services and Beyond. Thank you, everybody. I'm Hilary Fiorella. I am the Executive Director for the Center for Women at the American College. And today I'm very excited to bring to you an expert, someone who I met early in my tenure at the college about a year ago. I was introduced to Karen Atwell by Tip Cronin, who's in our advancement group here. And Karen and I have continued the dialogue for this last year, and she is a very valued resource to me. And we thought we would share her expertise with all of you. This sort of grew out of a conversation that we had and a realization how important empathy is to financial services overall. And we'll dig into that in a bit. Karen is a dynamic leader with over 35 years of leadership consulting and coaching experience. She's accomplished in talent strategy and development, HR consulting, executive assessment, coaching, training, and facilitating. Karen focuses on both people and productivity through a passion to grow others. And you'll hear about that balance between people and productivity in this presentation today. She is Chief Strategist of Dynamic Perspectives, and her previous experience includes VP Leadership Development with First Command Financial Services, Executive Director and Master Coach with UBS Global Wealth Management, and various sales management and senior leadership positions with Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and Prudential Securities. She holds an MA in Organizational Communications, is a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation, and is master certified in the leadership challenges and deep transformational coaching. Her consulting client list includes Ohio University, First Command Financial Services, MetLife, Penn Medicine, Ball State, PNC Bank, and Franchise Update Media. I know some of Karen's clients are on the call. I see folks saying hi to Karen in the call, so it's nice to have friends and family on the call with us today. So again, this presentation is normally delivered in a very intimate format. It's a workshop that Karen usually delivers in person. And obviously that's not possible to a very small group of people, and it's usually very interactive. And we want to make sure that we get your feedback and your questions throughout. So feel free, as we're going through this conversation, to post your questions in the QA function, and we'll do our best to see them and respond to them as we go through. Some of them we may wait till the end if they're not relevant to what we're specifically talking about. So I'm very pleased to introduce Karen Atwell and to kick off this conversation.
Thank you so much, Hilary. I'm really glad to be here with all of you, and I have a great deal of respect for the organization, so it's wonderful to be connected this way. When we started talking about this, I remember it was just a day when we were having a conversation, and we started going down the road of emotional intelligence and specifically empathy. And empathy is very near and dear to my heart because I've had so many experiences where I haven't used it well. So I want to start off with a story, if I might, the defining moment for me of when I started doing all of this digging around what is it to be a good leader and what is it to really connect with other people. And it's been a long journey, but it's been a very fruitful one. So many, many years ago in 2006, 2004 actually, I took a transfer with Bank of America from Chicago's private bank, the Bank of America's private bank in Chicago, to head up the brokerage group for Bank of America when they bought Fleet Bank out of Boston. So this was an exciting opportunity for me. It was a number of banks coming together in the Philadelphia area, all under the umbrella of Bank of America. There had been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. The team was large but disparate. They came from different organizations. They didn't know each other well. And they, of course, flew me in, and they had a big kickoff meeting for me at this location in this picture. I keep this picture close to me so I can always remember. This is the Union League Club in Philadelphia, so many of you may have been in this building. So this is where they had the kickoff meeting, and when I arrived in that meeting, there was, about 100 people in the room. And of course, my boss and my boss's boss, everybody all excited about kicking this off. And I got up in front of the room and I had really nothing to say. I have to admit that I hadn't prepared anything. It hadn't dawned on me to prepare anything. And I stood in front of that room and I said, wow, what a great big crowd you are. And I'm so excited to be here and excited to work with you. We're going to do great things. My husband and daughter are in the back of the room. We're going to look for a house tomorrow. We'll try to get settled as quickly as we can. This is just a really exciting opportunity, and I'm glad to be here. And I didn't know why, but it took months and months for me to gain credibility with the people in that room. And I realized, actually, it took a long time for me to realize that there were certain things that I had not done. I had not focused on the needs of the people in the room at all. I was very much in my own head thinking about what I needed to do in order to make this successful. I didn't recognize how big of a change everybody was going through. Not only just the change of getting a new boss, but also the change of all of these different disparate organizations being brought together. So there wasn't a lot of cohesion in that group in itself. I also failed to communicate any understanding of their feelings or their needs the whole time I was up there. And the outgrowth of that was that it took me at least 6 months to bond with any of those people. And I was there for 2 years. It was a job that I decided to step away from to go in search of what I didn't know about leadership, literally doing that, because I felt like I never brought that team together the way I should have brought them together. So that was a really great, big defining moment for me. And empathy became the missing piece, right? Because I wasn't connecting with the people. And that is what empathy is all about. When I think about empathy and I think about its impact, empathy has a tremendous impact on client loyalty. I think as advisors, we use empathy with our clients a lot. It's also a great tool and a great skill for empowering our teams and our staff and the people around us. And with those empowerments of our clients and our teams, we can actually generate a lot more revenue growth and drive higher performance and develop our people more quickly. So I think this is an amazingly important topic for the financial services industry, not just as it relates to our clients, but also as it relates to our staff. So I love what we've decided to talk about here today is what empathy is and it isn't. So we'll talk about that. How we use empathy with our staff and our teams, why that would be valuable for us. How do we create that culture of empathy or that environment of empathy with each other? And then how do we encourage change across the industry? Using empathy just as one of the emotional intelligence markers that we could certainly use more of in financial services. So we take a look at understanding empathy. I have to start really at the beginning. Empathy is one of the markers of emotional intelligence. And I'm sure that everybody's sort of heard this expression, emotional intelligence. This topic is pretty big. It's been big for a while. We know that emotional intelligence drives far more of our success and performance than our metacognition or our intelligence, just our IQ, if you will. Empathy is one of 15 markers or 15 competencies within emotional intelligence. And this is an important thing to note because I think in financial services, I know as an advisor starting out and then a producing manager and then a manager and then more of a executive leader across the organization, I think that what really gets developed strongly is our self-perception, being able to bolster ourselves and feel compelled and strong enough to go out there and hit it every day and get it done, because it's hard to build a business from scratch, right? And our assertiveness, our independence, some of our self-expression composite happens in there. We spend a lot of time in stress management, trying to be flexible, trying to be optimistic about our success. So our energy sort of goes into those places. And then decision making, so that we can build good portfolios, make good decisions for our clients. This interpersonal relationship piece seems to really get exercise when we are working directly with the client, and not so much when we get back to the ranch. Right? So back at the ranch is sort of like back at home. We were talking about this yesterday, Hilary, that at home we tend to, that's where we tend to let our hair down, and we let our emotions leak out, right? And we don't always treat the people we love the best. And this happens back at the office too. We bring our stresses from our client meetings back in to the office, and this whole concept of showing empathy and building those relationships back in the team become important. So I just wanted to point that out to you. If you're interested in learning more about the whole system of emotional intelligence, certainly there's a great book Dr. Stephen Stein publishes called The EQ Edge that follows this model. And I believe that you're talking about emotional intelligence in November, so there'll be another opportunity to hit on that then. But as we talk specifically about empathy, I want to start with a definition, and I'm certainly not going to read this slide. I'll let everybody read it now or look at it in the handout afterwards. Empathy gets confused with sympathy quite a bit. And of course, pathy, the P-A-T-H-Y, it comes from the Greek word pathos, which means feeling. So there's your feeling. And when we talk about sympathy, symbiotic, that part of the word is about being sort of side by side with somebody in their feeling. So I'm feeling, you're feeling, and there's a synergy between what I'm feeling and what you're feeling. So we can share our war stories with each other. Empathy is, I'm just all about how you're feeling. I am in your feelings with you. And again, something that we do really, really well with our clients, right? When we're in sympathy, we're able to identify alongside of somebody else. So if you say to me, I've just lost a loved one, I can say to you, wow, I know how that is. When I lost my father, it was really hard for me. And I go into a sympathetic story about how, what I went through. This happens all the time for pregnant women, right? Everybody wants to come up and tell you how they felt while they were pregnant, when they delivered, how it was, were they early, were they late? That's a moment of sympathy where we are together as sisters and we have shared stories. Empathy is a little bit different. It's really all about me being 100% there for you. So if you say to me, I've lost a loved one, I can say, I have no idea how you feel, but that must be hard. How can I help you? What can I do for you? And I think most advisors say, well, gosh, I do that with my clients all the time, right? That's what makes that relationship so sticky with my clients. So one thing that we do know is that children do this naturally. When, you've been around a little child and you hurt yourself, somehow bump up against a table and you go, ouch, and the child is right there. Oh gosh, that must hurt. Let me kiss it and make it better. Let me get you a Band-Aid. They love Band-Aids. Let me get you, let me do this for you. Let me do that for you. They're all about you. They're not, wow, I ran into that table just last week, which is where we are as adults. Because as adults, we've lived through a lot of experiences. So when somebody else has an experience, it generates an experience within us. And then we go into sympathy or apathy, which is just, I hear that you're overwhelmed, but I don't really care because we still have to get this work done. Kind of a mode. So I have a little video here, a Brené Brown video, and I'd love to share it with everyone. So this is Brené Brown giving us a definition for empathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I love that video because I think it's so crystal clear what it takes to be empathetic, right? I want to pause and see if there's any questions or thoughts that you have, Hilary.
Somebody was saying that they agree that that's a good way to express, and I wrote down empathy is feeling with people.
Yeah, feeling with them, right? So, one of the things that was mentioned in here is this 4 attributes of empathy from Dr. Teresa Wiseman. She's a nursing scholar in England, and she studied empathy not just in the nursing profession, where obviously it's, highly regarded, but empathy in a number of professions where empathy can make a huge difference. And these are the 4 attributes that she saw as being important for empathy, for displaying empathy, is being able to see the world from another person's perspective, staying out of judgment, which again is hard because our fast-moving brains judge things all day long. So it's a habit that we have that keeps us safe. Recognizing another person's emotions or feelings, recognizing them, communicating that you understand them and that you're with them, you are feeling with them in whatever it is that they're feeling. And when I think about these 4 attributes, I see us so often use them in client situations. And I see it being so easy for us to let these be the things that drop away when we take all of the craziness from being out in the field and bring it back into our teams. Because when we get to our teams, we need to get things done. So sometimes I know myself personally, I would come back into the office and I would be all supercharged. And I'm not really connected to the issues that the folks around me are having. And in many of these cases, these people work directly for me. So if I'm a leader, my responsibility is to be there for them, just like I'm there for my clients, right? So I'm still in a sales position, you know, as a consultant, a coach, and a trainer. Our company works with clients and we pursue client opportunities. So when I've worked with clients all day long and then I get with my group, I have to remind myself that I'm still with a group of people that need leadership from me. They need me to show up calm. They need me to be able to see things from their perspective. They need me to turn off the judgment or the I know what we need to do next. They need me to create space for them to be able to grow and learn and feel safe. You know, psychological safety is another big attribute that's out there right now. And empathy is one of the best ways to create psychological safety. Then I think about how in the world do I start to move towards being able to be empathetic more automatically? Because I can certainly be in my judgment head automatically. So how do I turn on this empathy thing? And you know, through all of our work over the last 10 years looking at this, we realize that there are really 3 brain centers that the human body has, and all kinds of science about this. No, I'm not making it up. There's all kinds of stuff out there about it, that we have our brain, and that's where we physically think of ourselves when we're thinking. We physically think of it as coming from inside of our heads. This brain is the thing that manages our fight or flight, whereas our biases sit. It's where our intellect sits. It's known as the ego, which basically just means that I understand that even though I'm part of the greater universe, that I also am an individual that stands alone. So that's the ego, the self. But there are 2 other brain centers in our body. One of them is the heart center. So we now know that there are more messages that come from the heart to the brain and also from our gut to our brain than there are that go from the brain to the rest of the body. So our brain is talking to our heart, our soul, our spirit. I mean, it's literally talking to it all day long. And it's also talking to our gut. So there's a lot that goes on. So if you take the time to get kind of quiet, you realize that there's a lot of voices that go on in your head. My favorite one is when I drop something. If I'm in a hurry and let's say my glasses fall out of my pocket and I kind of hear something hit the ground, but my ego brain is saying, we gotta go. And there's a little part in my gut that says, I think I might have dropped something. But my ego brain doesn't let me stop and look. So how many times have I left coffee on top of the car, literally driven over my glasses once? You know, so because I'm not listening, I'm going so fast that I'm not listening. So it's that learning to listen, because it's not in our ego head that we're going to be able to display emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, including our ability to demonstrate empathy, is going to come from our heart center. And it's our gut that's going to tell us, ooh, this is a time when I probably should slow myself down. So we've got to be able to make friends with all 3 of these brain centers so that we can show up better. And again, we do it so automatically when we're with a client. We get into a client room, it's quiet, we close the door, and we become all here for you. I'm all here for you. And it doesn't matter what the client says to me. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to, yeah, maybe you misspent your money. Yeah, maybe you only have 5 years to retirement and you need to find a way to save a couple $100,000. But you know what? We can take a look at this and we can tackle it and we can come up with a solution. That's being empathetic. And it requires that I step away from what I know, because that's not important right now, and I listen to the client and pay attention to what their needs are. So there's been some great work done by a woman by the name of Marilee Adams. She wrote a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And in this book, she talks about the importance of being able to shift my mind from my ego brain to my heart center. And this is done, what she says, moving from a judger mindset to a learner mindset. If I'm not busy judging, then I'm in a place where I can learn. When we're not judging our clients, we're learning from them, and we're learning what it is that they want and where they need to go so that we can figure out how to best help them. And I think that sometimes this gets lost when we get back into the office. It certainly gets lost in the industry in general because we are super hyper focused on staying tough, staying driven, demonstrating to everybody else in the office that I'm killing it. I remember what it was like as an advisor and a branch manager and just trying to keep that momentum going and that ego going, of I can make this happen. But when I calm down and I step away from that, I can move from this kind of judger questioning methodology that's going on in my head, which is all about protecting myself or winning. And I can move into a place of learner questions where I can start to say, what's really going on around me here? What do my people really need from me right now? Really important, deep transformational questions would be questions like, how do I want to be remembered in this situation? I have to slow down to ask myself that. What do I want people walking away from? If I lead a team, and most advisors are involved in some aspect inside of a team, if I'm part of this team or I'm leading this team, how do I want the team to perceive my ability to contribute or my helpfulness? How do I want them remembering me 10 years from now, 5 years from now? Those are big learner questions that require that I really calm down and center myself. And what's really cool about this is you can do it anytime. You don't have to do it right at first. In my last role as head of leadership development at First Command Financial Services, an amazing company, I had an entire department of fabulous people in human resources that worked really hard to help me sort of adjust the way I even came into a meeting because I was so in that, quite frankly, sales mindset of get it done, keep the pace going. And one of the things that I learned was catching myself early in the game and shifting gears. So I might walk in all sort of, I thought I was just going fast, but I guess I probably looked totally stressed out. I can walk in all pumped up, but I realized pretty quickly that my best ability to have an impact, a positive impact, was going to be if I could breathe and I could switch lanes. If you look at this, Marilee Adams shows in this graphic that anytime along the way, if you're on the judger path, you can take a breath and switch lanes and start to move into a learner. If you have children and you think about times when the family's been discombobulated or your kids arguing with you and you're not getting anywhere and your voice is going up and their voice is going up or the tears are flowing or whatever is happening, and then some adult in the room, every once in a while it's the child, but some adult in the room says, okay, this isn't working for me. What do I need to do differently? That's the switch. That's the switch from judger to learner. That's when I stop and take a breath and I slow down and I'm able to release judgment. So if you're interested in learning more about this, I will say Marilee Adams' book is fabulous. It gives you 10 powerful tools to learn how to do that more effectively. And the bottom line of the whole thing is this whole discussion that's happening out there about Mindfulness, when we hear about it, I'm sure that many people on this call have a yoga practice. I hope many people have or are experimenting with a meditation practice. All of these things are about slowing ourselves down and making ourselves more available outside of our heads. When we slow down, we realize how much time we spend in here and the value of being out here. I always know when I've slowed down because all of a sudden I see the sky. I mean, I know I can see the sky, but then all of a sudden I see the sky and the vividness of the blue really hits me. And I notice the bird nests in the trees, and all of a sudden I'm connected with something outside of my own head. And that's what that's where you need to get to really be displaying pure empathy. Slowing down, breathing, kind of snap yourself out of it. Releasing judgment. Once I slow down, then I can take a breath and I can release judgment. I can release my biases. I can quit trying to win. I can quit trying to think that I know better. I can quit telling people what to do. I can allow people to find answers on their own. I can encourage other people. I can help my people develop themselves. I can give my power away without losing myself in doing so. This allows me to be able to, what they say, hold space for other people. Just be there and be sort of just holding space, being able to listen and hear, and giving the floor to somebody else. Staying present with them. And these are all really important aspects of this. And when we do this with our teams, I know, my team, the response was huge. And their devotion to me grew. Their trust in me grew. My credibility grew. If I could go back in time and do anything, it would be to enter that role in Philadelphia in such a more open, honest, empathetic, connected way. I wouldn't have had to switch a lot. I'm still I was a good person then, and I'm still a good person today. But having that insight would have been so valuable for those people, and how they remember me now, I think would be much a better place to be. So, yeah.
So I'm going to ask you some questions now. I read a lot of research as part of my role leading the Women's Center, and several sources like Oliver Wyman in 2020 did a survey on empathy as it being a key element in financial services. It's a key element for financial advisors, obviously. Fidelity, also their talent organization, did a survey that said the same thing. And I've seen empathy as a requirement, as a skills requirement on job descriptions, many job descriptions. So we know it's so very important. And I think that your ability to take that skill, which we know is important when you're in a client-facing role, and it is required in that relationship with a client, and turn it back to your relationship with others who you work with, your peers, your subordinates, people on your team. When we were going through this session, I had an aha moment about how I present sometimes, and I've had some time to reflect on that and think about that, and how I now come into my interactions, my connections with people. So it's been helpful to me. But as I've been thinking about this presentation, I think that empathy may be one of the things that we can do to help the retention rate in our industry. We know that retention is very, very low in our industry. It's somewhere between 20 and 30%, depending on who you ask. We know that people flee this industry, and this, some of it has to do with business and, how successful they are as an advisor. But I have to think too that being happy in your work environment contributes to the decision whether or not you want to stay at that firm or stay in the business. So I think this is a very important skill to learn. I think it can be learned, it can be exercised, it can be improved on. And you've given us some very specific ways to identify it, to think about it, to move from one side of the page to the other. And so I really appreciate that. I'm going to read a question from one of our participants. It says, how can life after the pandemic bring staff closer when people are continuing to work remotely? How can life after the pandemic bring staff closer when people are continuing to work remotely? Do you have any ideas about that, Karen?
Wow, very powerful question. I think we're all sort of treading a new space that we've never been in before, right? So certainly, I think there's an opportunity for teams to come together and staff to come together and have a conversation about just that question. So many times leaders try to figure it all out. You know, as an advisor, it was my job to figure out what to do for a client, right? But as a leader of a group of people, it's not your job to figure everything out. It's your job to bring people together and open up the hold space for others and open up the conversation. So I think one of the things that you can do is bring your team together and have your team work on how are we going to stay connected and how are we going to put our business, you know, our processes, our business processes together. How are we going to work through this? And then you trial and error. I mean, you try some things, you come back together, you have more conversations, you leave room for people to try and fail and retry and change. And but you do all of that with empathy and kindness. And, you know, if you do it without the, you know, without the ego head of you having to be the one that knows it all, or you having to be the one to direct everybody, I think that can be very powerful.
Do you think that everybody working remotely do you feel like you know people better because you've seen their children or their partners run through the screen, or I know you have a dog. I know you have a really cute sheep dog. And I know that you go between Florida and Maine because your scenery changes. So I've learned some things about you over the last year because we've been on Zoom that I might not have learned otherwise. And so do you think maybe there is some, I don't know if intimacy is the right word, but some implied intimacy that we've all gained from this experience that we might be able to bring to our working relationships when we do get back to quasi-normal?
Yes, very interesting question. So let's talk specifically about the financial services industry. And of course, I just have my personal perspective here because I've been in the industry. In order for us to embrace all of this change and to embrace getting to know each other personally, and this is probably the first phone call I've been on this long where my sheepdog hasn't been walking through the room and asking for me to pet him or her on the head. But, you know, in order for us to embrace all of that, we're going to have to let go of some of the old standards. You know, you mentioned before how empathy is showing up in job description. So the industry is saying that we need this. I wonder if the industry is applying it more towards relationships with clients and less about how we go about building our business or building our teams. And I say that because in order for us to embrace not just what's happened since the pandemic, but also the younger generations as they come into the industry, the new ways of working, the difference in the clients today than 20 or 40 or 50 years ago. In order for us to embrace that as an industry, I'd like to see us let go of some of the classic standard ways of doing everything. So we can't demonstrate empathy if we're still busy yelling at rookies, telling them that they have to dial the phone this many times, or they've got to have this many appointments a week, or they're going to fail, or intimidating them, or you know, leaning into some of the policies and procedures that used to be in place. I mean, in how we train. And so I know there's a lot of branch managers and some of the companies are sort of moving away from that. But I think this idea of if we're going to embrace some of these new ways of being, we are going to have to release our judgment around how things were best done 20 years ago in this industry and look at what's going to be best for the future. So,
Hallelujah to that. We have a question from my colleague Azish, who asks about the strategies around empathy and how they impact the workplace culture. So have you seen these strategies around empathy actually change workplace culture, good, bad, or otherwise? And then are there any other measures around the effective empathy in addition to retention?
yeah, so certainly I have a plethora of examples of empathy changing things, but I think one of the ones that's so easy to identify with is making a phone call into any company to get help with anything. So nowadays you dial the phone and you get put into a phone tree system, some kind of, they have 12 ways of making sure you never reach a real person. They keep sending you to the website where if it worked, I wouldn't be dialing the number. So you're already frustrated. And when you get somebody, many times you end up getting somebody who is really good at technically solving the problem or telling you what you can or can't do, but they're not connecting with you as an individual. If you think about a time that you made a phone call into an organization to ask for help and a live, warm body answered the phone, if not right away, pretty quickly. When they answer directly now, I'm stunned, right? So I want to write a letter of congratulations when a company answers the phone. So, but pretty quickly you get somebody on the phone. And if that person is thoughtful enough to take a second and just listen to your issue and acknowledge the problem, even if it's as simple as, gosh, we're awful sorry that you're having that issue. How can we fix this? Let's talk about how we can get this done. That little display of empathy changes your whole perception. You don't have to fight with that person now. Somebody's got you, I love that expression. I've got you. I've got you. It's okay. You've arrived someplace where you can let your guard down and feel better. So that's what happens when we use this in the workplace. It changes cultures immediately. And one leader demonstrating just a little bit more empathy in single situations throughout the course of a week can have a dramatic impact. So yes, I think, today, think about where do I need to slow down, breathe, snap out of it, release judgment, release my biases, and hold space for other people to actually breathe in the same room with me. Where do I need to do that? And just try it. Try it at home. Try it at the grocery store. Try it where it can't hurt you. The grocery store line is always a great place. Try it. See. Yeah, it changes lives. It changes cultures.
We have another question from Miranda, who thanks you for the book suggestions and asked if you have other books or resources that help develop the empathy skill naturally. So she wants to work on this some more, it looks like.
Yeah, so empathy, there's a lot of stuff out there around empathy, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. We might be able to zero it down to something specifically that you're looking for. I would say that, there are a lot of apps out there now around mindfulness and meditation that talk a lot about empathy, generosity. They look at a lot of these topics that are considered to be mindful topics. So empathy is considered to be in that sort of mindfulness space. I recommend these. I mean, most of them have some section of them that is free. Go in there and play around. Again, you can do it someplace where nobody will ever know that you've done it, because it's an interesting thing to enter into that space. It's like I'm admitting that I really want to slow down and do better in these areas. And in order to do that, I have to take the edge off of what made me successful in financial services to begin with. I just remember that tension between being able to be who I wanted to be and having to keep the momentum up in order to stay alive. So it's up to us. I mean, the only way the industry is going to change is if we just individually decide we're going to do it differently.
Yeah, that is the big irony of it all. I mean, we've all been conditioned to be, cutthroat and tough and whatever other adjectives we want to use. But we, like you said from the outset, we know that it works in our relationships with clients. We know that it has a good business outcome if we apply it to our teams. And some of us are leaders or want to be leaders. I think that this is a good way to acknowledge and learn some tools so that we all have a better working environment. I mean, who doesn't want to feel really good about where they go to work and the people that they work with and have more positive connections with the people that they're working with, as opposed to just kind of going along your day in your lane, doing what you're responsible for. You talked about apathy before, and I have to do this and I have to get this done and I have a number and I'm accountable to this. So I'm just going to do my thing without thought or consequence to other people. So Noreen asks if you have seen empathy applied in personal relationships with family. And as we were prepping, I will admit to having admitted to Karen that sometimes, I have been guilty of taking advantage of my family and not taking that space. But now, since I've been talking to Karen about empathy, I think going forward, I will be, and I'll let you comment on the family aspect of applying empathy.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The closer the relationship or the more dependent you are on the behaviors of others, the more challenging it is to display empathy because there's a risk. I have to get pretty raw in order to put myself out there with an empathetic tone. And, like for instance, if I was to display a lot of empathy to the top advisor down the hall, the feeling is that he or she's going to crush me, right? It's like, because their demeanor is going to be so much bigger than that. I will tell you that empathy into your families is really all about taking a breath before you interact with your family and remembering to slow down and connect with your heart as much as you are connected with your head. So for me, I used to come home from the office. I lived about 1.5 miles from the office, so I had no downtime between the office and the house. So, I let the whole ego thing, by the time I got done with my day, I was so amped up with stuff that had to be done and needed to get done, and I didn't get done. And I would walk in the door with that energy without any empathy for what the energy was inside the house before I opened up the door. So I'm meeting it with my corporate energy, and they're meeting it with the after school energy and the watching TV energy and the finally can relax because that day is over and maybe I'll play around in the kitchen and try to make something. Or, I would walk in the door and I lose control when I do that because it's not my office. So if I come in with that level of energy and I'm focused on bam, 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 getting things done, and I walk into an environment that isn't the same without any awareness, I'm going to get derailed. And when I get derailed, what you're going to get from me is grumpy mom. Why are the books on the counter? I've told you 1,000,000 times not to load everything up. Why are your coats over the couch? Why? Why are things not controllable by me is what I really mean. And then everybody feels sort of picked on and yelled at, or at the very least, they say mom's in a bad mood. So one of the things that I learned when I was studying this, actually when I was building this workshop originally, one of the things that I realized was that I needed to slow down and breathe before I entered the office in the morning so that I could walk in available to other people. And when I entered my house in the evening so that I could walk in available to people, that I didn't bring it all with me. I still have it in there, but right now I'm going to take a breath and pretend that this is a client meeting, because I would never enter a client meeting like that. Wouldn't even dawn on me to.
And taking a breath is good sage advice. And I reflect back to, somewhere along the line, it was count to 10. Back in the day, it was, if, you don't know where you're going with this, if you're feeling stressed, just count to 10. And I think that's the equivalent. So somebody else said that they tried to connect with you on LinkedIn, but there are a lot of people with your name. So for everybody on the call, we'll make sure we include Karen's LinkedIn bio link so that you may connect with the right Karen Atwell. Michelle is commenting that this is great material, happens to her all the time. And is Marilee's book a good place to start with empathy in family and work, from Noreen? Is that a good place to start?
Yes, that book's a great place to start for any aspect of this. It goes way beyond empathy, so I think you'll enjoy it.
All right, well, it looks like we have answered the questions from our panelists, from our participants.
Yeah, so, let me talk a minute about, the benefits of this and why it's so important. In my book, when we bring empathy, when we bring awareness of others and we slow down and create that environment, I really love the way that it causes a team to open up, and the people in the team get along better with each other. It just builds better momentum. It builds better decision making. It creates an environment where people can come up with new ideas. They're not afraid to suggest things and self-solve. And, obviously a more fun place to work. So it really increases retention. Even as a branch manager, bringing your advisors together in the weekly meetings I used to have, and I had this, very kind of crisp agenda, and it was all about teaching them something they could use with their clients or talking about who had been successful that week. What if I added even 10 minutes or 15 minutes on the front end of a meeting for people to get to know each other better, or for people to just like decompress from everything that they've had going on, sharing one thing about themselves. Or one of the ones that I loved once was, somebody said, what was the first album that you ever purchased and what media was it on? We started a great conversation where we got to know each other from a music standpoint. So those kinds of little things that you do that really demonstrate that you're paying attention. Empathy is really no more than I'm out of my own head and I'm really available to you. And when we do that, when we create this environment, revenue growth will happen, people growth will happen, retention will go up, job satisfaction will go up, and people will want to struggle to reach the aspirations that have been set for them. So I'm a big believer. Seen it in
I have
my
to
own
think.
life.
I have to think that as a leader, if you're open and not judgmental and you make space for people, they're more willing to share. They're going to open up. They're going to take chances and they're going to contribute more. And Rosie was making a comment in the Q&A about being connected or disconnected with her children and how it closes off her kids if she's not empathetic. And I would think that would apply to the work dynamic as well. So it looks like we are running up against the clock. Can we share this with our co-leaders if they are not part of the American College? Absolutely, you can share this content with friends, family, colleagues. We would appreciate you sharing this. We think this is good information for all of us. And I'd like to thank Karen Atwell for joining us today to talk about the importance of empathy and how to develop empathy and the 4 qualities of empathy, the science behind empathy, how to improve it, how to use it, the benefits of it, the business benefits of it. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for spending this hour with us. And thank you again for your time today. Have a great rest of your day.